If we can start with roll call, please.
I'm looking at the monitor and seeing if what happened. There we go. Okay. Chair Dennison.
Here.
Vice Chair Hutt.
Here.
Commissioners Dellis, Pevsner, and Spears.
Present.
All right. First up, let's approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Approval of minutes. Does anybody have any edits?
I have no edit.
I have no edits. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. I believe we will not be having a council liaison report tonight.
I do not believe so.
All right. Next up is community input. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Going once. Twice and sold. Next up will be our first public hearing. First, we have a disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Are there anything to report?
I visited the site and spoke with the applicant and walked around the building, and it was got a very good picture of what he wants to do.
I did not visit this time, but I've obviously been there many times, so I know the location.
I have been there fairly recently myself and did not speak to anybody while I was there. So with that, first item is a modification of conditional use permit 22-02, a request to allow for on sales beer, wine, and distilled spirits in addition to special events. Do we have a presentation from staff?
We have a brief oral presentation from Associate Planner Wolf, and also the applicant is here to answer any of your questions.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, Commission will be reviewing modification of Conditional Use Permit 2202. It's a request to include additional license types for the operation of Taylor's Old Fashioned Market. In April of 2022, the Planning Commission approved Conditional Use Permit 2202, granting the use of the business to operate with off-sale beer, wine, and distilled spirits, as well as instructional tasting. The applicant, Mr. Kevin Taylor, is planning for a tenant improvement of the building to open a small eatery restaurant as an expansion of the deli, allowing patrons to the opportunity to sit and enjoy food freshly prepared by the business. The additional use of the restaurant is planned to be an improvement of the existing interior space, less than 2,500 square feet, with minor exterior alteration to a portion of the east end of the building. The director's list of commercial uses permits the restaurant, any restaurant, of up to 2,500 square feet. Additional licensing being requested includes types 41 and 47. 41 is for the on sale of beer and wine. 47 includes distilled spirits. And type 77, which allows for events on property adjacent, such as the parking lots, as long as they're in common ownership. Findings for approval of the conditional use permit have not changed since its original approval, except to identify the applicability of liquor license to a restaurant rather than a grocery store. First, that the site remains adequate in size, shape, topography, where the restaurant is associated with alcohol use, is proposed as an improvement of the existing underutilized space, needing no expansion of the building's footprint. The site maintains sufficient access on Baldwin Avenue and Sierra Madre Boulevard. The restaurant is proposed at less than 2,500 square feet in size. Any anticipated parking impacts are mitigated by the additional parking provided by the adjacent municipal parking lot. The proposed restaurant and its associated alcohol use would occupy less than 2,500 square feet. The liquor license is regulated and enforced by Department of Alcohol and Beverage Control. Therefore, the proposed use is not detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare, nor will it unreasonably interfere with the use, possession, and enjoyment of surrounding properties. There is a demonstrated need for the use requested where the liquor license would allow the business to operate competitively with similar businesses in the greater regional area, thereby promoting business retention. The proposed use remains consistent with general plan objectives L3, L33, L35, and policy L35.2. The proposed use is suitable for the downtown commercial core area where similar uses serving alcohol are located. The downtown commercial core area has historically had higher concentration of businesses serving beer, wine, and distilled spirits than it currently does. The proposed use is pedestrian-oriented and activates an area of the public space currently underserved by pedestrian-oriented business. Therefore, the use would benefit the public convenience and necessity. That concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions. And if the commission wishes, I do have visuals to display on the projector.
I guess one question I have is on page 40 of the staff report, there's the diagram that shows the restaurant area and the eating area. And I just wanted to know what type of latitude the applicant has to move that around if, when he goes to build out, he figures out, oh, you know, this part should be over here. Are we basically just approving sizes and the concepts and he can move those around inside the building?
That would be the position of the city, is to allow the use anywhere on property. However, it's my understanding that the Department of Alcohol and Beverage Control wants a confined and defined space. So if needed, we could amend this diagram as an exhibit for Department of Alcohol and Beverage Control's use.
But that's long after us, right? So if he needs to amend it to get their approval, you know, he doesn't have to come back to us.
I would not think so. This is just an exhibit. The resolution allows a use not pertaining to any specific area on the property.
Okay.
But just to clarify that, if it weren't for the requirement for us to give a CUP for changing the alcohol license, this wouldn't be before us, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So that part of it, changing the interior, isn't something that would ever be part of our purview. It's just the changing of the alcohol license that we have to amend the CUP for.
Correct. It's more a use permit.
Great.
Great. No more questions?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you.
Did the applicant want to give a presentation? Welcome to, not required.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for allowing me to be here tonight. And I want to thank Josh also for all of his work on this project. Really not a presentation, but just thank you for your consideration. Expanding this conditional use permit. The primary response, the reason why I want to do this was really to build community within the store. If you think about like a Whole Foods, or I think even Vroman's down the street had an eating area where you could have a coffee, soda. It's not just beer and wine. It's having a sandwich, it's having a place to, if you have a spouse that doesn't want to shop, and they want to sit down somewhere, they could do that within our store. And so we get that quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I just want to thank you for your consideration. And for the two of you that haven't come by, I'd love to give you a tour sometime. And our hope would be to have it finished before Thanksgiving is what, based on your approval tonight, we'd like to plan for Thanksgiving. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we'll take public comment for this agenda item. If anybody has any comments they would like to make about this specific agenda item, now is the time. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Deb Sheridan, Valley Vista Drive, and I just want to tell you, first of all, that I am thrilled. I hope that you approve this, but I do have some questions too, and I briefly talked to Mr. Taylor, but my questions are because I looked at the report and it says the hours will be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Taylor's actually closes for shopping at 7 p.m. So I'm wondering if people can come in and get a sandwich and a glass of wine or a bottle of wine and sit, and then go shopping, or what will happen that way? And I mean, as I said, I think this is wonderful, and I can't imagine, except maybe a few businesses in town, that wouldn't be really happy to see this. Thank you very much.
I believe when I went there, Mr. Taylor, who drives over 100 miles a day to maintain that store, talked about not being open till 10 o'clock at night because it was a bit late, so.
Well, actually, that was another question that I had, was since none of the other restaurants are open till 10 o'clock, and even, I don't think Lucky Baldwin's or R.T. Rogers stay open till 10 o'clock either. As we like to say, this is Sierra Madre, everybody goes home, and so anyway, thank you.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to comment on? All right, we'll bring it back for deliberation. And, excuse me, Mr. City Attorney, I believe that we originally granted the conditional use permit based on the standard times that we've allowed for every other one, so that if they choose to operate at different hours than they are today, that is allowable already.
I'm going to defer to the director here.
Yes, at our, the first meeting that we had regarding this discussion, we did have a bit of discussion regarding the hours in operation and wanted to give some flexibility there, and I'm assuming this is what's presented to you before you today as well. Obviously, the applicant is not intending to operate till 10 p.m., but again, the flexibility is built into the conditions.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think this was a great project when we approved it before, and this just makes it better. So I think there's no problem supporting this and making all the findings. I hope the business goes well enough that you can extend your hours and we can go down and have a glass of wine after our planning commission meetings. So I'm totally in favor of this project.
Yeah, I agree. The additions and the build-out that he's doing in that store is long overdue. When I first moved into Sierra Madre, that store was a going concern from wall to wall, and it looks like it's going to be coming back that way. And the changes he's made and the bringing back some of the things he's doing is going to be, I'm looking forward to. As someone who now, eats lunch in town every day, it'll be nice to go in and have a sandwich and even a glass of beer, yeah, because they'll be there. So I'm all for this, and I can support this.
I couldn't agree more. Great project before, even better project now. Looking forward to having another choice in town. So, no objections. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we approve conditional use permit 22-02.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is consideration of Planning Commission Resolution 22-10, recommending certification of an environmental impact report and approval of a mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the Meadows at Bailey Canyon project, and consideration of Planning Commission Resolution 22-11, recommending 1, approval of a general plan land use map amendment, 2, approval of a zoning map amendment, 3, approval of a specific plan, 4, approval of a lot line adjustment, and 5, approval of a development agreement for the Meadows at Bailey Canyon specific plan project.
So we do not have a staff report for you today, but, or a presentation rather, but we do have, the applicant will be providing a presentation regarding the specific plan, and then followed by City Attorney Garagosian regarding the development agreement.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. Good evening. Once again, Jonathan Frankel on behalf of New Urban West. It's my great pleasure to be back with you to discuss changes made to the Meadows at Bailey Canyon specific plan since our previous 4 meetings. I just want to begin by thanking you for all of your feedback on the specific plan. It's my sincere hope that the red line that was provided to you a week in advance of this meeting reflected your comments. We worked very diligently to try and do that in every possible instance, and I know we're not able to do that in every case, but we did, and our team, all of whom are here this evening, worked very hard on it. I do want to be brief in my remarks, and I have a number of other team members that are going to come speak as to park design process, firstly, we were going through a comprehensive list. I compiled all of my notes from the previous meetings, and it didn't fit on one slide, so I stopped. As to the changes that we've made here, these are 25 of them that I think are very significant, some of which you'll hear about later this evening. Obviously, adopting R1 definition of floor area, reducing the size of the homes, limiting the average size of those units, requiring a particular unit mix that ensures 1-story units, as well as the particular placement of them. Clarifications to minor modifications, I know that was an important point, and a number of other design changes, incorporation of those design guidelines associated with Stonegate that Commissioner Spears and others suggested that we incorporate have been incorporated, but over the past 2 years, we have been working to respond to the feedback that we've been receiving. So at this time, one of the issues that was raised previously, and we did address in this red line, was related to drainage of specifically the retention gallery proposed in the park. And I wanted to invite our civil engineer, Winnie Tam, to come just provide a brief overview of the retention facility and its capacity to store and infiltrate a substantial amount of water.
Winnie Tam with Fusco Engineering. So there were some questions raised in the last meeting regarding the detention system and the capture of the water. So to clarify, the detention system consists of can retain 129,000 cubic feet of water. It is designed to capture and retain water from our project site. It can capture and retain 100% of our project site for the 50-year storm event. The 50-year storm event is the LA County Flood Control's capital storm, flood storm. So that is the maximum any development is required to design to. So that is what the size of the detention can capture on this project site. And to put it in a little perspective, the detention consists of 8 rows of 60-inch diameter pipes underground with additional 1-foot ponding depth above in the park. And that is what consists of that volume.
60-inch pipe?
60-inch, 5 feet in diameter with gravel rocks around it, buried underground.
It's not a concrete box.
No, and it's open bottom, so it encourages infiltration. The treatment is what's underneath the ground in media, and that's what they're treating it. So it would infiltrate into the aquifer.
And in the unlikely event that there's a 51-year flood, the excess would go where?
The secondary, which is what the excess is, it goes out to Crestvale. So as is today, the outlet for the entire site goes out to Crestvale.
Above ground or underground?
Above ground.
Above ground.
Yes.
Okay.
Secondary by code has to exit above ground. In the event that all storm drain in the whole city floods, it is required to go somewhere. Eventually everything goes out to the ocean, but it has to get out there, so it's surface flow out. So that's a requirement by any state agency.
There's a huge tunnel that goes under Lima all the way down, and that would be, okay. Fine.
Yeah, no, so our project site do not connect to Lima, and that was a question last time. Lima is a different system. So
Okay.
it would have to go all the way across Carter. And I think that was it. Oh, so give you a little comparison, the volume of water, for that much water of 128,880 cubic feet of water equates to almost 23,000 bathtubs, or for a pool of 15 feet by 30 feet, 4 feet deep, it's 71 pools. That's to give you a little perspective. So.
Cool.
Thank you, Winnie. It's a substantial amount of water, and we've designed the system to accommodate, again, to treat all of the on-site flow in a 50-year event. So next, clarifications to minor modifications. This is reflected in the specific plan. Minor modifications may only be approved by both the city manager and the director of planning and community preservation, and notice must be provided to the planning commission and city council. We also made clear that there are a number of things, a number of standards in the specific plan that cannot be subject to minor modification, namely increases to floor area, the location and number of one-story homes, and the number of parking spaces in the parking lot proposed at the public park. So we did include a public design process for the future park. And at this time, I want to ask our lead landscape architect, Aslan Hare, to come up and talk just briefly about the public park design process.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. Thanks for having us back again in front of you. And I did not introduce myself properly last time, so apologize for that. I'm Aslan Hare from Ground Level Landscape Architecture. As Jonathan mentioned, we discussed last time the public design process for the park, and just to give a little bit more clarity on that process, we want it to be something that is equitable throughout the community. And so part of that is having community workshops and making sure we're engaging with all the different aspects of the population of the town to be able to see what's needed in the park and possibly more importantly what's not needed in the park, right? So looking at the parks that we have available to the community throughout Sierra Madre, what is a good aspect of each of those, what's necessary in this part of town, how can we take advantage of Bailey Canyon and that wilderness aspect. There's a large variety of things that can be included in a park, and so it's really up to these community workshops that we plan on hosting and actually have already hosted. Let me skip over, got a couple of photos of a few that we've already begun hosting, just to try to gather that information from people about what they want to see in the public park that would be associated with this project. So again, posting flyers throughout town, getting the word out, having several of these working sessions, making sure that everybody in the community has the ability to come, to make their voice heard, to provide their input. After all, it is everybody here, it is their town, right? So they should have the ability to help design those public spaces that are available to them. We definitely want this to be a robust and dynamic process. And we also want to make sure that we're making a space that's usable and functional and then beautiful to everybody who will be using it and as a part of the process. So it's something as a designer that we always look forward to a great deal, because it's a lot more fun to talk to people than to stare at a computer and draft something, especially if it's meaningful. So that's something that's really important to us on this project, and taking advantage of those great views, all of the different things we've talked about that are just such boons to this town, to be able to incorporate all of that into this is something that we feel is really important. As we've had these different workshops we've already begun hosting, and just the community involvement we've had so far in discussing this project through this specific plan process, we have already made changes we've discussed in the past, but just a couple quick reminders. We did remove some of the parking already in that park area, so now we're just down to those accessible parking spots. And then we also had restrooms in there. Those have been removed as well. So we've already started making tweaks during the specific plan process due to that. So we're looking forward to having a more formalized process as we continue to move this forward to actually have that park design process in place. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Aslan. Okay, very briefly, critically important offsite improvements to Carter, as we've been talking about on the last several meetings. Now both options that you see here on the screen are included in the specific plan. Actually, it looks like the repeat of the two options. However, I think we're all familiar with what option one is, which is a straight sidewalk design, and option two now shows the curved design. But in the specific plan, both options are included there. And the development agreement now includes obligations to finalize negotiation with the county to secure any necessary approval, as well as post bonds for all offsite improvements, as well as make these improvements a condition of the tentative tract map that will be processed subsequent to this initial phase. Next, we've worked very closely with our partners at Madre to come up with a solution and to solve the desire to create a new legal lot that is zoned open space to the north of the retreat center. There will now be 3 conservation parcels, the 2 you see there in green and the orange area, restricted use area. This again will be a new legal lot. There will be no habitable structures in this area, and it will be subject to rezone as open space. Just a quick rendering of a potential park concept here. And as Aslan mentioned, I think we've got a really wonderful opportunity with the park, and we're very excited about the ability to design that further. I'm going to go through a couple quick slides here, and then I'm going to turn it over to our lead architect, Ev Garcia. As you know, we reduced the maximum floor area and average floor area very substantially in the project, eliminating more than 1,000 feet of gross floor area from our largest units. We also included an average floor area, and this is a shot from the specific plan, of no more than 3,500. All of these floor area definitions cite and utilize the definitions directly from the city's municipal code. So at this time, I'm going to ask Ev to come up and give a little bit of background. He was able to do some really good analysis about the existing community and the surrounding homes. I'd like to invite Ev up.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Eduardo Garcia with LCRA Architects, and I'm happy to be here to go over some of the revisions that we made to the specific plan based on the comments we received from the Commissioners and the neighborhood. One of the comments from the neighborhood were the size of the houses and compared to what's existing on surrounding the property. And what we found that the houses in the vicinity right around the property, 40 homes surrounding Madre de la Rosa are 2,000 square feet or larger. And this is based on LA County Assessor's numbers. And we use that in order to create an apples to apples comparison from the existing houses to the houses that we're proposing in terms of square footage. The average floor area of the homes around the area are about 2,300 square feet. Now what in the meadows, the square footage we're proposing, the net habitable floor area is ranging between 2,325 and 3,100 square feet. So that really gives us, if we look at the average of the houses we're proposing, is 2,854. When you compare that with the houses we're proposing, with the neighborhood around there, we're really looking at the average difference about 400 square feet, thereabouts. So it really brings the houses in line with the community. I think the concerns of these houses being overly large and compared to what's existing, I think this starts to show that we're more in line, and especially by the reduction that the client did to bring them down, I think really helps to make them feel more part of Sierra Madre. Now the next slide we're showing is it reflects the changes that we did per the comments from the commissioners in terms of seeing the net habitable area. This chart, as was seen before, shows the maximum floor area allowed per the R1 standards, and then it shows the proposed maximum floor area based on R1 standards. So it starts giving you an idea of how they compare. We're showing the difference on the next one, where really when you're looking at that difference, we're looking at about 65 square feet to about 1,400 square feet in terms of the range that we have as a difference. The final column is the proposed net habitable area. We're looking at our numbers ranging from 23 again to 3,100 square feet. It really starts showing that houses are pretty much in line with Sierra Madre, and it makes them more realistic, and the comparison is easier, I think, to see now that we show these numbers. The next one, in response to comments about the angle plane requirements, we did look at bringing that into our specific plan. We did look at the Stonegate specific plan to see this requirement. And what we're proposing on this is that all the Plan 1s will comply with the encroachment plane. All these are one-story buildings, and our building will easily fit within that. Our Plan 2s and 3s, there will be a slight encroachment on the corners, but this represents the narrowest lots. Usually, I believe the houses along Street A. The rest of the lots are slightly wider. Definitely C starts getting wider, and then when we start looking at the lots along Sunnyside, you will see that the lots get wider, and in doing so, the houses will definitely fit more comfortably in that. So the amount of encroachment overall on the project will be minimal based on these requirements.
Do you have the numbers of houses that will fit, of the two-story houses that will fit within the angle plane?
Offhand, I don't, but we can definitely get that number to you, to give you a specific number. And the other comments we had heard were concerns about the form, scale, and massing of the buildings. This is something we had seen previously. This is what we're proposing in terms of proposed plotting on the houses, and we are locating Plan 1s at specific areas where we feel it will help massing and reduce the feel of the massing. On this one, we're showing Plan 1s on each of the corners. So as you approach the streets, you're seeing the one-story mass, and then slowly builds up to the two-story between the block, and then reduces back to one-story. And we also have a one-story at the top as you enter into the retreat center. We do have a few more at the top of Street A, and that's really just in coordination with the retreat and trying to keep some views from the site. What this slide starts to show is we're proposing a 25, 35, 40 plan in terms of the units. We're proposing a minimum of 25% of the project to be Plan 1. So all these will be one story, and as seen on the previous slide, they're located where they really make the best impact on the site plan. Next, we have 35% Plan 2s and 40% Plan 3s. So this starts to give you an idea of the proposed mix for the units on the project. And this starts to show some of the enhancements to the design guidelines. Again, we did take a look at the Stonegate specific plan and see what we can incorporate and make it part of this, our specific plan. In terms to help building mass, form, scale, and articulation, we're proposing that details should reflect the architectural style of the house and also should be in proportion to the house, which I think is very important, that detailing does not become overly large. It's all in the spirit of the particular architectural style that particular house is in. What we're also proposing is stepping back of the second floor and height transitions on 4 sides of the building, again, to help in terms of bringing down the mass and creating a continual architectural style as you go around. Roof components should be applied consistently and at all elevations. We definitely encourage the use of porches, low roofs, again, to reduce the mass and to continue the architectural style. Size and location of windows should be related to the scale and proportion of the building elevation. I think this is really important, that the windows and their detailing relate to the architectural style that is being proposed. I think windows do change in relation to the architectural style in terms of proportion. Some are longer, some are wider. I think it's important that that's kept in consideration as it is being designed. The size and location of doors should be related to the scale and proportion of the building. I think we've all seen those large two-story entries that we all dislike. We definitely don't want to see that, and this is a way of taking care of that and encouraging low entries. I think for a lot of the styles, the entries are covered by a porch or a deeper recess, so they're kept in style, with the style and in scale to the building. And colors and materials should be consistent with the complementary and be complementary with the selected architectural style. We encourage, again, colors to be consistent and reflect the architectural style, each one. And what we're proposing is that these will have 3 color schemes, so each color scheme, again, will be consistent with the architectural style, but encourage variety on the street scene in different colors that are still complementary. Again, colors are encouraged to be continued throughout the house, as well as materials, so it becomes 4-sided architecture. And we encourage transitions of materials to occur within corners, interior corners, so you don't have terminations of materials that just does not look realistic and definitely makes it look more like fake architecture, which, lack of better term, that's what it becomes. So these reflect some of the changes that we're proposing. I think these reflect also the comments from the commissioners in terms of trying to get it to a point where you feel more comfortable and it's more relatable to the R1 standards as well as the Stonegate standards that you're familiar with. And now I pass it back to Jonathan.
Thank you, Ev. Commissioners, that concludes our presentation. Thank you again for this opportunity to be with you this evening and to continue working with you on this project. Of course, our entire team is here, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody have questions for
I'm good.
the presentation? All right, thank you. Mr. City Attorney, you have a presentation?
Good evening, Commissioners. Today I'll be talking about the amendments that were made to the development agreement that are consistent with the feedback we received from individual commissioners. And we are loading the presentation. Perfect. So first, we included a new recital, and before I put it up on the board and before I put it up on the screen and read it, just wanted to provide a little bit of background. So at the Planning Commission, previously we've spoken about the concept of conditional zoning, meaning having a zone and imposing conditions, and then if those conditions aren't met, the question is then what happens? So I've opined in the past that we can't have an automatic reversion if a condition isn't met. So in other words, if the zone is changed from institutional to residential, and there's a number of conditions that go along with that, and those conditions are violated, we can't then automatically revert the zoning back to institutional. And the reason for that is because state law requires that we go through the necessary steps to rezone again. Now, even if we go through those steps, there's a case out there that says if you go through those steps and it's determined that the action you took to rezone is a forfeiture, meaning you're changing it because they violated one of your conditions and not because it's a legislative decision based on land use, then it's not acceptable. But nothing prevents the city from rezoning that site if it's determined that some other use beside R1 is more appropriate. So for that reason, we've included the following recital. It states, whereas should the development of the project not proceed in accordance with this agreement, the city reserves its rights to initiate a general plan and zoning amendment for the property. In other words, for whatever reason, if this project doesn't go forward, the Planning Commission, the City Council may revisit this at a later time to determine whether or not an institutional zone would be more appropriate for this site. The second change was made in section 9D. And currently, so under state law, a development agreement, unlike many other types of contracts, runs with the land. It's recorded on title, so there's notice to anyone that purchases this land, and it runs with the land. So it kind of operates like a CUP or a covenant. And there's specific language in state law that makes that clear, and we just added that language to the development agreement. So now it says, with respect to successors in interest, the burdens of this agreement shall be binding upon, and the benefits of this agreement inure to all successors in interest to the parties. That's really just a restatement of the law with respect to development agreements, but we thought it'd be helpful to also include it in the agreement as well. We also made clear in that same section 9, we added an additional language that says, in no event shall the developer be released from its obligations and liabilities under this agreement without the city's written consent pursuant to this section. So if there's, once this agreement's entered into, the developer will be bound by it, and the city can enforce its rights through, there's a remedy called specific performance, meaning we go to the court and we tell the judge force them, enjoin them to take this action that they promised to take, which would be our remedy. And if there's any successor in interest, so let's say New Urban West sells to some other entity, their successor in interest would also be bound by this. Let's say, for example, some other developer comes and purchases the land, the agreement between New Urban West and the congregation falls apart, and some new developer comes and purchases that land, that developer would become successor in interest and would also be subject to this development agreement in order to proceed, because this agreement runs with the land. It's not specific necessarily to just New Urban West.
Question,
Yes, sir.
how is this agreement monitored by the city?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, who's keeping track of all the things that they said that they were going to do to make sure that they get done?
It would be the responsibility of the planning department.
And the planning department has one code enforcement officer, and, I mean, it seems to be kind of, it's a complex agreement that has a lot of whatabouts. I mean, so I want to know that the citizens are going to get what, you know, they say they're going to get.
This wouldn't be enforced by the code enforcement officer. This would be enforced by the planners in the planning department. Is that correct, Director?
That's correct, yes. And also, if we were in a building stage, then it would also be enforced by the building official.
And we will also be reviewing this agreement periodically, because this agreement, of course, has phases, and this is only the first phase of this agreement.
Right, and so is the plan that the site will be visited on some regular or irregular basis to make sure that what we see at the site is what was agreed to?
Yes, on-site visits will be conducted throughout the construction of the project or phases of the project as we move through, yes.
And my other concern is that this is going to be a multi-year event, and that in the future, you know, not everyone in the who's going to work in City Hall has gone through all this to see all the details, and how, you know, how does that, you know, what all those things get passed on so that the future, you know, inspection reflects the understanding that we have today.
Yeah.
Again, throughout if you're referring to some of the building phases that were taking place, there'll be regular inspections both by the building inspector, building official. There's still continued communication with the planning department regarding many of the requirements, so I would feel confident that those would be adhered to during the normal review process.
Okay.
So as the applicant has noted, we have now two different definitions for open space. Before there was only one. Now we have a hillside open space and a retreat center open space. So the hillside open space, no real changes there. It's going to be, the open space easement is going to be recorded within 60 days of issuance of the first building permit, so that's consistent with what you heard at the last meeting. But this retreat center open space is new, and so within 24 months of the effective date of the development agreement, which is the same timeline for the tentative track map submission, application submission, as well as design review permit application submission, the retreat center parcel must also be divided. So there also must be an application submitted for the division of this parcel. Most likely, dividing this parcel into the let's call it the retreat center parcel and the retreat center open space parcel will happen at the same time as the tentative track map process. It'll all be in one application, most likely. The congregation must tie the retreat center, must record a lot tie for the retreat center and the retreat center open space to make sure that those parcels cannot be sold separately. But they're being divided for the specific purpose of rezoning that retreat center open space parcel. And once rezoned to open space, there's going to be a conservation easement that's also going to be recorded against it, just as a fail-safe. And you have an attachment, attachment D, which is Director of Planning and Communities Preservation's director's interpretation, which basically interprets recreational uses in this open space area to prohibit any kind of residential use, but to permit certain religious uses that are tied to recreational uses, like, for example, expanding the prayer garden, things of that nature. That exhibit is part of the development agreement now. So if approved, that would be something that would bind the city.
There's also annual reporting that happens as part of the development agreement, I believe.
That is correct. Also new is the process for reviewing a public park and developing it. So under the terms of this agreement, now the developer has to submit a site plan, planting plan, and a plan for conceptual amenities within 18 months after the approval of tentative track map. And that's going to be reviewed, and comments are going to be provided by the Community Services Commission. So now, under this framework, we really have a three phases of this project. The first phase is what we're in now, which is changing the zone to development agreement specific plan and the EIR. The second phase will then be the tentative track map, dividing all the lots, including creating that retreat center open space parcel and design review permit. And the third phase will be this here, the development of the park. And this will be the last phase. And as stated up there, this all has the approval, the applications, the meetings for the Community Services Commission have to happen within 18 months of approval of tentative track map. The Community Services Commission will be limited to 3 public meetings. And this bullet point hasn't changed. The park will be dedicated within 60 days after the city's issuance of the certificate of occupancy for the 22nd unit. That has remained the same. But what has changed is this last bullet point. Previously, the warranty was for 90 days for all public park improvements. And now, per the Commission's suggestion, it's been extended to 2 years. And this amendment is in section 4B. So under the development agreement, we have a new section dedicated to construction of offsite improvements. Under this section, the developer must acquire rights to offsite improvements of Carter Avenue from LA County, and that has to happen within 24 months of the effective date of this agreement. In other words, when the tentative tract map and design review permit applications come before this body, the developer should have already received its approvals from Los Angeles County. Now, there's a chance, because we can't guarantee what Los Angeles County is going to say, the way the development agreement is currently worded, if the developer fails to acquire those rights, then the city will attempt to acquire those rights, and the developer will have to pay for the city's expenses in trying to acquire those rights. But if the developer is successful, then they'll enter into an improvement agreement with the city to do so. Now, if the city is going to try to do it, the city will have 24 months to try and acquire those rights. Now, if the city is unsuccessful, so we're talking about 4 years now, over the course of 4 years, if both the developer and the city are unsuccessful, the remedy in this case would be that the developer would pay a fee equivalent to the estimated cost of the offsite improvements. This is also included as a condition of the tentative tract map. The developer is required to bond for these offsite improvements, and a bond will be posted if they are unable to either acquire those rights or make the necessary improvements themselves. Any questions?
Well, I mean, question bordering on deliberation, so it's sort of a gray line. But I mean, to me, approval of the EIR and the whole plan is based on the idea that Carter is going to be widened. And so, if the county doesn't play ball and the developer pays the city some money, even if it's a huge money, it doesn't fix the problem, and we still have an unsafe situation. So I don't think that remedy works, and I think we need to have just a hard condition to recordation of the final map that the land is acquired and the widening is improved. And I'm talking just about the east-west part, not the north-south. I mean, the north-south is a nice to have. But the east-west part, I think, is really fundamental to approval of the EIR.
I'm certainly happy to make any amendments if that's a direction from the Planning Commission. I think perhaps we want to have that discussion.
Yeah,
Public comment. Yeah.
again, this is sort of the questions bleed into deliberation, so we need to talk about it more, and we need to take public comment. But that's my concern with the remedy for that situation is that even if it were a very large fee that was paid to the city, it doesn't mean that the road's going to get widened. And really, I mean, sure, I want the city to get lots of money, but more important is the road actually be widened so we alleviate an unsafe condition.
Understood.
Yeah, we want to fix the problem.
Minor modifications. So I kind of want to talk about the evolution of staff's thought process on this and the feedback we received from both the applicant as well as the Planning Commission. So the first version of this minor modification term stated that minor modifications are those modifications to the date of performance of obligations and modifications to the project description for the project configuration, the open space configuration, and then the net zero water calculation. And who made that determination? That was in the hands of the city manager. Now, the feedback we received from the Planning Commission is that not only are these topics that shouldn't, are these items that shouldn't be amended, they should remain as approved, but to place that in the hands of the city manager gives the city manager too wide discretion. So the second version of this included the following language. It stated that no increase of density or intensity of the project beyond those which are permitted under section 6.4 of the Meadow Specific Plan. And so we tied the definition of minor modification that exists in the specific plan to the development agreement. Now, as we thought through this more, we thought the problem here is that, well, minor modification doesn't only relate to the items in the specific plan. It also relates to items in the development agreement, because there might be items in the development agreement that may need to be modified, minor modifications, of course, that that otherwise would have to go straight to the city council every time. For example, if an exhibit was entered into incorrectly, if exhibit was attached, the incorrect exhibit was attached, the agreement would need to be amended. Does that need to go before the city council? Of course, we wouldn't. That would be a waste of city council's time, and we wouldn't want that. So there needs to be some latitude for minor modifications to the development agreement. So we thought perhaps we define it in the negative. So currently the way it's written is minor modifications to the project or this agreement in accordance with city development regulations and any approved entitlements that do not modify provisions affecting timing, performance, or value of the developer's obligations to the city set forth in this agreement. So the deadlines cannot change. The major responsibilities that need to be performed cannot change, and the value of the funds to be received by the city cannot change. So then what can change, you might ask? Again, just to provide an example here, there's a requirement in here regarding encouraging electric appliances. One requirement is that the developer will erect on-site signage and maintain a website that explains the benefits of electric appliances. Now, perhaps it's determined at some point that off-site signage would be more effective in communicating that there are going to be electric appliances at that specific site. That, I think, would be something perhaps that might constitute a minor modification. That determination will be made by the city manager, who reports to the city council, and the city manager is unlikely to take any unilateral steps without consulting the council. So in that sense, there's some, there's going to be a reporting mechanism. And that concludes my presentation.
I have some questions about that last one. So, in section 6.4 of the specific plan, there's a list of things that can change and can't change. And if I recall correctly, in the event of conflict, the development agreement wins.
Correct.
So 6.4 doesn't mean anything now?
No, I think where 6.4 does continue to mean what it says, because I don't think there isn't necessarily a conflict now between the development agreement, because in the event of a conflict, the development agreement will control, but there's no conflict per se between the specific plan and development agreement, because the specific plan says you can't amend these things per the specific plan, and the development agreement says timing, performance, and value in the development agreement itself can't be amended. So they're really talking about two separate things. However, I will note that I had a conversation with Vice Chair Hutt prior to this meeting, and I believe Vice Chair Hutt proposed incorporating section 6.4's language into the language here for the current version as proposed. So to make reference to the specific plan section 6.4, and also that you can't modify timing, performance, and value.
Yeah, specifically 6.4I that says you can't increase the floor area or convert a one-story to a two-story. I think we also have a couple of inconsistencies between the revised specific plan or revised development agreement about who approves, about notice, and then also I don't think either one discusses necessarily appeal, and I wanted to understand how that works. So we can, I don't know if we want to do that now or wait till we can deliberate on that later, but.
Happy to address those points. With respect to appeal, there is no appeal process. The city manager's determination is final. There is an inconsistency between the specific plan and the development agreement regarding who approves. Currently in the specific plan, it says the city manager and development director. Planning director, I'm sorry. And the development agreement only says the city manager. I had a conversation after publication of the specific plan. I had a conversation with the developer to make sure that that's consistent, so it would be the city manager in both instances. And I believe you had another question regarding notice.
Well, yeah, in the specific plan, it says that there will notice via email will be given to the planning commission and to the city council, and that's not in the development agreement. So I think we should put both.
We can certainly include that.
And is the way it's written that it's not appealable, was that a choice, or is that a state law that we can't make that appealable?
No, that's not written in the development agreement expressly, and in the absence of an appeals process, there is none.
But if we wanted to, we could put an appeal.
Correct.
I mean, the city council call for or something like that.
Correct.
Because I mean, I think most of this stuff is going to be, like you said, moving sign locations or things that are really minor that nobody cares about. But I think it gives people a lot of comfort to know that if something, a rogue city manager approves something, that we have an ability to make sure that it's not a major modification that happens through the minor modification process.
All right, any other questions for staff? All right, at this time, we will take public comment with regards to this specific agenda item. Please state your name and address for the record, as well as keep your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have a list of people you want to start by calling?
Susan Newhousen, and then after will be Claire McLean.
Good evening. You guys are a small batch tonight. So again, I appreciate your careful review of the Meadows project. And I had sent some comments with drawings. One thing I want to say just in relation to what we just heard, this retention system, it hasn't been evaluated in the EIR. It needs vetting. It's not just, oh, we think this is great. I want to talk again about the house sizes. So we heard from the architect comparing to the county numbers. Well, the county numbers are the exterior square footage. He keeps talking about net habitable square feet. You guys keep asking him to talk about gross floor area. They keep doing that. So habitable square footage versus exterior square footage, excluding the garage, there's still going to be a 250 to 300 square foot difference when you start counting exterior walls. So they're still not comparing the same, and it's more like the neighborhood is, I think it was 2,000 square foot houses. The exterior, you add that, average it all out, it's more like 3,000. So we're still talking 50% larger on lots that on average are, I think it's 1,500 or 2,000 square feet smaller. So it's not compatible with the neighborhood. Again, 40% are 3,775 square feet, 35% are 3,650 square feet, and the smallest is single story are 3,200 square feet. So they're still grossly oversized by the lots, by up to 66%. I understand that you all have provided variances for larger houses than allowed on a given lot, but this development would be variances of 66% over what's in the code, and to me that's a little over the top. And it's going to be reflected in the appearance of the neighborhood. So none of the 42 lots support a house of 3,775 square feet, and only one supports even the smallest size house of 3,200 square feet. So in my opinion, this project is still wildly flawed in regard to alignment with the character of Sierra Madre, the general plan, and the municipal code. Second, the conceptual plan that you saw on the screen again, it's not representative. It doesn't even meet the stated front yard setbacks where the garage is supposed to be an additional 5 feet back. So it's not even showing you what the supposedly is going to be in the specific plan. And so to me, it's like, it's not even then representative of the articulation that they're doing or anything. Given that 75% of the houses are 2-story, range from 3,600 to 3,775 square feet, I hope you agree that realistic drawings of houses and massing along the entire blocks of the A, B, and C streets need to be done. They showed that nice little rendition at the end. Of course, that's not representative either. There aren't going to be trees behind. There are going to be 6-foot fences between those houses, and that was not representative. So to me, this points out again that the specific plan is not sufficiently specific. Second, there are errors in their final draft. The August 22nd draft doesn't always align with the red line version. That figure you showed, it's not like that in the final draft. It's incorrect. So,
Thank you, Ms. Newshouse.
am I done?
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Oh, let me just say one more thing. Importantly, I don't understand why you're even considering the specific plan. For the Kensington, it made sense. It benefited the community. This project only benefits New Urban West and the Passionates of Chicago. You know, all these machinations for this kind of thing is just silly. Thank you.
Claire McLean, and then Deb Sheridan.
Hello. Thanks for showing up tonight. It's what's important in today's world. I'm Claire McLean. I moved here last year and live at 420 West Sierra Madre Boulevard. I walk up to Bailey Canyon every night. That is my R&R. That's my peace and solitude. That is the way I reset my being for the next day. One thing I've really noticed is that whole Meadows area has its own ecosystem. And this really concerns me because I am speaking for the voiceless. I'm speaking for all the animals that are up there, all the trees. I just don't understand how this project has gotten this far along to actually clear cut that entire area, turn it into dirt, water all that down, and then replant trees. If a developer was truly an environmental developer, they could work around these trees. There is enough room in that meadow to build homes for other people or to build an establishment, an institutional establishment or anything. But to take out these trees that have been there forever, they are healthy, they house birds and bats. I see bats up there. There was nothing in that wildlife report about bats. There's bats up there all over. The deer graze. This is its own ecosystem. It really needs to be looked at it like that. What you're doing is part of clear cutting, which is part of climate change, which is part of the disaster of this planet. Why would we be part of that? This can be done without taking out the trees, without completely destroying the habitat of all those animals. Go up there in the evening. Just dare yourself to go up there and sit and just watch what goes on. They don't know there's a fence there, the animals. The only ones that know there's a fence there are the deer. And they stay over at the monastery because they're so excited to have that area to go to. And to clear cut that entire area is just insanity. This would be a part, we would be a part of what's going on our earth. And we should not. That is a gem up there. And I say GEM and GYM. People go up there for both reasons. And to build a park, we already have a park. Why would you build a park? Why would that even have anything to do with it? It doesn't even make sense to clear cut and then build a park. Bailey Canyon Wilderness Park is our park. And we don't need another park. And I think I heard that they're going to take the bathrooms out. Well, how convenient. Fewer people will go there, and they'll all use the one at Bailey Canyon. You're going to lose all the silence, all the entire, you go up there, you can't hear anything but the animals and the trees. And it's really amazing place to be. And I hope you will reconsider allowing this developer who's not environmental to cut down all those trees. That is absolutely insanity. Thank you for listening. That's just my place. And we do have, you know, we do have the resolution that we're a wildlife sanctuary. Evidently, they didn't get the memo, but I'd be happy to show it to them if they didn't. And
Thank
we
you.
need to take care of our animals and our property. Thank you.
Deb Sheridan, and then Natalie Shore-Peterson.
Deb Sheridan, thank you, as always, commissioners, for paying attention to the details. Over the last few months, this has been such a thankless job for you, but there are quite a few residents who do thank you, and they have spoken to me, and we're all impressed with what you're doing. And my questions tonight that have not been adequately addressed, or I'd just like to add my voice to as well, is the first one, of course, the widening of Carter, and exactly what you said. Who is responsible for this? Who owns the road? And the fact that they're still saying, after how many months? Well, this will happen after you approve it, is just totally unacceptable, because here comes number two, regardless of what anyone assures you, including our own fire department, we see fire after fire burning down supposedly fireproof houses. The latest one is in Northern California and has already killed 4 people. And access to the meadows is crucial. There have to be 2 entrances and exits. How many fires have we lived through? I've lived through 3 of them. And and number 3 is the latest description of the project, which discusses the parking. And as you have heard, it seems like this really doesn't solve any problems, because there is Carter, there's Grove, there's Lima. You see the cars parked there on the weekends and people walking along, and it's really, really dangerous. But number 4 too is the architect compared the architectural style, comparing that to Stonehouse. Well, as we know, with Stonehouse, the reason that those houses that are finally being built up there are because of what this planning commission has done, and you've been able to say, no, this isn't quite acceptable for these particular reasons, and please change them. But reading the specific plan, and I don't think there is any change in the specific plan, that you will not be able to do that. If you approve the specific plan, you approve all the houses. And as currently being pointed out, those houses are still very big. And I thank you yet again.
Thank you, Ms. Sheridan.
Natalie Shore-Peterson, and then Alice Wischello.
Good evening again, Commissioners. Thank you for all your hard work. Natalie Shore-Peterson, representing my mother at 501 Cressvale Drive and my sisters. I'm just following up on a letter dated August 1st that I provided to all of you. And everything still stands in the letter, but I wanted to highlight a few key points. And before I go on, I also want to note that my sister Sally Shore and I, we met with the developer and the engineer and the landscape architect today at 501 Cressvale, so we could give them a better understanding of our concerns. So let me just highlight a few of the items in my letter. Regarding the specific plan, I know the commissioners asked for more specificity in the specific plan, but one area where less specificity is really in order is related to the proposed park space. That is actually not something you have to commit to. The MOU use very general language, and I urge you to change what turned into will include and shall include into back to may include, which was the original language. Please restore this language. It liberates everyone working on this to collaborate and come up with a park that the community wants, rather than locking them in with will include and shall include. Regarding the retaining wall that we have raised between our mother's property and the along the southern border of the monastery property, we still maintain that a structural engineering survey should be done to ensure the wall can withstand the pressure, the activity of digging, excavating, laying more infrastructure. The EIR does include mitigation measures, which involves a geotechnical engineer, but that's after everything's already done. And particularly regarding the park area, that is something that's going to revert to the city anyway. So I believe the city also has an interest in making sure that that wall is structurally sound, or if any improvements are needed, to do so before all the work begins. I also want to raise a question. I'd like to get some clarification. I know that the initiative qualified for the November ballot, asking the voters of Sierra Madre, do they favor this project or not? And I am curious about the process. If this moves forward at the Planning Commission level before that, and also moves forward at the City Council level, how does that square with this measure on the November ballot? So it's a question of process and timing. I'm sure I could speak more, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alice Wichello and then Mike Cunningham.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alice Wichello. I'm at 417 West Sierra Madre Boulevard. Thank you so much for being here and for all your work and effort to hear all of the sides of this issue. You've been very, very patient. Again, my big concern here is Sierra Madre's general plans policy R3.2 states, ensure that wildlife open space, including the area of the city designated as high fire hazard severe zone, is left in its natural state. The Ventura County Fire Marshal said, if you put your house in a fire-prone place, modern fire-resistant materials are just Band-Aids. It's where you build, not what you build with. All it takes is leaves and embers. Once houses ignite, 90% of them, even brand new ones, burn down. And that's the Ventura County Fire Marshal. What I don't understand either is Sierra Madre also has a forest management plan with a mission to preserve canopies for their environmental and aesthetic benefit. 100 large canopy trees will be destroyed. So we have a wilderness, beautiful park up there with these fully matured trees that I don't know are how many years old. So they're all going to be torn down to build a public park, but there's already a natural wilderness park up there. And to plant new trees that take how long to grow? They take a long time to grow. It's just, and incidentally, lots of water. So I thank you very much for listening to me, and I just hope that we can save Bailey Canyon.
Thank you.
Mike Cunningham and then Filippo Fanara.
Good evening, Commissioners. Once again, I'm Mike Cunningham, Retreat Center Director at Madre Dolorosa Passionist Retreat Center. You have redline versions of the Meadows Specific Plan and the Development Agreement before you tonight that incorporate nearly everything the Planning Commission has asked for. Many are made to ensure that the public will know precisely what will happen upon the City Council's approval of the Meadows Plan. It also includes when it will happen and what projections are incorporated to ensure that everything will be delivered as promised. And while some of these changes may seem minor, there are important improvements. Other changes are more significant. In response to your comments, I will let New Urban West speak to the changes they've made to their site plan, but it should be evident to all agreeing to limit the average home size to 3,500 square feet was a huge concession by the builder. We at Madre Dolorosa feel our concessions on open space were similarly significant. We believe that we fully addressed any obligations that we might have had regarding open space by giving the city more than 3 acres of valuable developable land for a new park, and in addition guaranteed the permanent protection of 2 huge uphill open space parcels. So the discussions over ownership and methods of protecting the hillside open space and the retreat center open space were difficult for us. We believe both sides have considered compromise is now incorporated into the Meadows plan. And we realize that's been hard for all involved, but that's often the nature of good compromises. Overall, we feel the Commission should be proud of the concessions and clarifications it's achieved over the last 4 public hearings. New Urban West and Madre de la Rosa have worked hard to respond positively to your suggestions, and the changes you have brought about have achieved a Meadows plan that will hopefully gain city approval. As the Passionists and Madre de la Rosa look ahead to a 2nd century as one of Sierra Madre's landowners and well-established religious institutions, we appreciate your commitment to the interests of the city and its residents. This process has been bruising at times, but it's been a good process carried out transparently and in the public interest. We hope that soon might be the time to bring this process to a conclusion, and we'll be delighted if this results in a vote for a favorable recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Filippo Fanara and then Tricia Searcy.
Filippo Fanara, and I live at 1180 East Topeka in the city of Pasadena. Good evening, Commissioners. It's good to see you again. I'm Filippo Fanara, and I'm president of the Board of Directors for Madre de la Rosa. Tonight, I would like to encourage anyone who still has questions about this plan and the process the city has undertaken to review, to look at the redline versions of the Meadows-specific plan and the development agreement, which are posted in their entirety on the website. These documents show all modifications, clarifications, improvements that have come out of the public deliberative process that has played out over the last 4 preceding Planning Commission hearings. On some pages, like those of the park plan example, there's more red font than black, which speaks to the care the Commission has taken to representing the interests of the city and its residents. It also speaks to the willingness of the New Urban West, the Passionists, and the Retreat Center to concede and compromise in order to earn approval of Meadows' plan. The red line changes to the park plan, for example, show the Commission was able to address concerns. Adjacent homeowners should take comfort because the Planning Commission has reduced the risk of parking lot noise by cutting the size of the parking lot just to 2 ADA compliant accessible spaces. It had helped to design a buffer that ensures their privacy while protecting the mountain views. Similar changes are detailed throughout the specific plan, all which should give comfort to the community. One of the most significant of these changes concerns NUI's agreement to reduce the size of the homes in the meadows. This change makes any arguments about mansions and the meadows false and ensures that the meadows will be much like the rest of the neighborhoods in Sierra Madre, except that it will be more environmentally sensitive. So Commissioners, I commend you for a good job, well done. Maybe there are a few small details left to address. The big lift is now done, and everything you have accomplished is guaranteed through the development agreement. The Retreat Center Board is pleased that the resulting plan continues to protect the sacred solitude that has given visitors to our grounds much solace and comfort over the last 98 years. On the Board's behalf, I encourage you to move the Meadows plan along to the City Council with a positive recommendation. Thank you very much.
Tricia Searcy and then Sally Shore.
Okay. Good evening, Tricia Searcy, 734 Fairview Avenue. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment tonight and for your service for the community. Regarding the off-site plan, the developer is asking you to approve the project absent the condition of widening Carter. The revised specific plan offers only, quote, a condition for commitment to and timing of Carter to be included in the development agreement and tentative tract map. This vague language about a future commitment after project approval doesn't provide firm assurance that there will be 2 evacuation routes or that the offsite plan will ever happen. As things stand, the county is unlikely to allow it. Mr. Frankel has already expressed his opinion that they can build the project without the offsite plan. And right now, that's what's going to happen because the off-site plan isn't even close to being an option. And even as written in the amendment, they can still build the project without it. Barbara Velturo had a discussion with Dana Rothman from the LA County Real Estate Division, who had been involved in discussions about a potential easement. Ms. Rothman indicated that she hadn't had any discussions with anyone from the city or the developer since January of this year when Mr. Franco contacted her. She said approval of any easement would have to go through the EPIC LA process, which would include environmental review of the entire project, not just the easement, and the county would become a responsible agency. This is problematic because the off-site plan still has not been properly subjected to environmental review. It was snuck in after the DEIR was circulated, and the county was not even given notice. I don't think the county will look kindly on that, or the other significant flaws in the EIR that the city is willing to let slide. Certifying this flawed EIR doesn't mean the county will accept it. Ms. Rothman made that clear, that the whole project would be subject to county review. A related problem is that the LA County Flood Control District sent in a comment in response to the notice of preparation of the EIR, asking to be included as a responsible permitting agency and making specific recommendations. So far as I can tell, those requests were not responded to in any way. Given that, I don't think it bodes well to fail to address their concerns and then ask them for approval. The county also suggested back in July 2020 that conceptual plans be submitted through the EPIC LA as soon as possible for consultation, since they don't generally allow housing to be constructed on existing facilities. To my knowledge, that hasn't been done either. It would seem that the only way to know if the offsite plan is viable is to require that the EIR be done properly, including review of the offsite plan so it can be submitted to the county to go through the EPIC LA process, and then and only then decide if our zoning and general plan should be changed. The developer hasn't laid the necessary groundwork for this project to happen, and because it's complicated and it takes time, and now they're asking you to look the other way and while they try and figure it out. I don't think that's what's in the best interest of our city. I think it's not too much to ask that you require environmental review of the offsite plan and that go through the EPIC LA process before approving changes to our zoning code and general plan that assume county approval that they do not have and are unlikely to get. And as Commissioner Hutt pointed out, a bond doesn't help because money can't fix this problem. And just one last thing, the architectural changes that were presented in the revised plan are mostly shoulds and very few shalls. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Sally Shore.
Good evening. My name is Sally Shore. I live at 634 West Sierra Madre Boulevard, and I also speak on behalf of my mother and family, and our family home is at 501 Cressvale Drive. I want to thank the commissioners for your hard work going forward. I'm not quite sure it's soup yet, and I have a few questions. My first question has to do with the specific performance clause that's being added to the agreement. My question is, who actually, other than the planner, can hold the developer responsible to committing to the clauses? Is it only the planner? Are the citizens able to directly speak to this? If it's only for the planner, it's a bit of a cause for concern for us neighbors, because we do not feel that planning has really represented the neighborhood interests. Most of the work that's been done has either been by the commissioners or by, at least in our family's instances, going directly to the developer. Planning has not really represented the neighbors' interests. My second concern is to the drainage proposed going to Cressvale, which directly comes out in front of 501 Cressvale in event of a major flood. And I would invite the commissioners to come and have an ex-parte visit at our property, and we can show you exactly why this is an extreme concern for our family, the way it's currently designed. And then finally, we did have the opportunity to meet, particularly with the landscape architect and the team today, but I was a little taken aback to find out that there had been community meetings about the parkland that we were never advised of. So I would ask going forward, as this is worked on, that they make the commission that's set forth in section 1.7 to not only hold public meetings and public conversation, but make a more active attempt to engage with the immediate neighbors. The immediate neighbors' addresses have been on all our communications, so they know how to reach us, and we would like them to do so. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this particular agenda item?
Good evening, Commissioners. Alex Arietta. Thank you for your commitment on this project and your diligence. A couple of points around the offsite improvement plan. Based on what you've heard this evening, I wanted to reiterate how imperative it is that that does become subject to a thoughtful, comprehensive, appropriate environmental review. As our colleague Barbara has indicated, she had some pretty intensive discussions with Ms. Rothman at LA County, who did indicate that while the city of Sierra Madre would have responsibility for the FEIR, LA County would be designated as a responsible party for the same. And they would subject it to very thoughtful, careful scrutiny. So I really have a hard time understanding how we would contemplate, the commissioners, approving a flawed DEIR like this without having an appropriate review of the offsite improvement plan. It's just unacceptable and it's inappropriate for a project of this scale. There have been comments made this evening about there are only a very few small details to approve still. And nothing could be further from the truth. That is just not accurate. With the single biggest housing project in the history of Sierra Madre, everyone is acting because we've had 4 or 5 public hearings, that all the required diligence and all the hard questions and all the thoughtful considerations have been asked and completed. And we are far from that. This is a huge project that it will forever change the city of Sierra Madre. And you're taking the absolutely appropriate diligence in reviewing the appropriate steps to this and the analytics that have to be applied in reviewing and carefully considering this project. There is no rush to push this through, especially when we have such significant outstanding issues like an offsite environmental improvement plan that has not been subject to environmental review, such as the fire risk that continues to be given, for whatever reason, short shrift in the analysis on this project, building in the highest fire risk zone in the city, despite the fires that we continue to see that burn in Northern California, Southern California, including new homes. That is just has to be something that is placed on higher importance priority in terms of why we're even allowing the project to get to this level of discussion and consideration. Please require approval of the offsite plan in the EIR before this is given consideration, serious consideration to move forward. It has not been included, therefore not seriously considered by yourselves and certainly not by the City Council. Thank you very much for your continued efforts with this and your focus and looking out for the city. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this agenda item?
Yes, good evening. I'm Lynn Coleman, 200 West Carter Avenue. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I actually need your help, and I have what I hope is a quick question. I've been looking for some renderings or pictures of what this project will actually look like. This is the only one I have seen from the specific plan, and it shows basically the entrance to the property, looking up on the hillside, and a couple of rooftops. Is there something else that you can direct me to so that I get a real sense and feel of what this project looks like? As if I were walking down the street, driving my car through, what do the homes look like, left to right of me, east, west, north, and south? And I'm sure there's others in the community that would like to know that as well. I know you all are extremely comfortable with things like city ordinances, lot coverage, massing, and angle planes. And when you see these laid out numbers, you probably get a visual of what this project looks like. Somebody like myself, I don't. That right over my head. Many others probably feel the same. And We have said thousands of words about this project, but sometimes a picture is a lot more effective in conveying what this project looks like. So please, would you let me know as well as others as to what this project actually looks like? It seems that at this point in time, with all the technology we have, we should be able to have some kind of a virtual drive-through where we can see what this community is, and we can compare it to the neighboring communities so that we know if what everybody has said tonight is true as to whether or not this project actually conforms and is something that is benefit for Sierra Madre. I just want to add two other points regarding the widening of Carter and the fact that there is no agreement with the county. Please consider that there's also no agreement in place with LA County Flood Control District to allow direct access into Bailey Canyon Park from the meadows. Lack of access raises both traffic and safety concerns. New Urban West has a history of proposing large projects and then scaling them back dramatically for approval. It would seem this project is the same. To be in alignment with the municipal code and the general plan, as well as the appearance of the adjoining neighborhood, it's imperative that New Urban West increase the size of the lots on the A, B, and C streets so that the house size to lot size ratios are at least close to what's required under our municipal code R1. When easements are subtracted out from the total lot size, the usable fenced lot sizes now start at 6,000 square feet and not 7,800 square feet. And the vast majority of lots on the ABC streets, as the plan currently stands, will be that size. In other words, row after row of 3,650 to 3,775 square foot two-story houses on small lots. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing your response to my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this specific agenda item? All right, then we will bring this back for deliberation.
Where are we starting?
Well, we've got plenty of things to look at. I think all of us have some questions of either the developer or the city attorney or opining to get towards that. So do we want to start on the specific plan or the development agreement?
I think the specific plan before the development agreement makes sense, but I think before we get to the details, and I think there's some devils in those details we still need to iron out, I think it's good to sort of step back and look at the whole project again. And I think that the project that's before us now is a far superior project to one we've seen at earlier stages. And so I think that, you know, I applaud the applicant and everybody for helping mold this to a better place. But I think we face two fundamental questions here. The first is development of a residential project versus development of an institutional project. So keep in mind the question is not development versus no development, because property owner has a right to develop. Whether they do that institutional or residential is the question of the general plan amendment. And I think we've discussed this a lot, and I think we're pretty comfortable with the concept of residential for the southern portion of the property. The other fundamental question is whether that residential is going to be sort of R1 that conforms to our code, or it's going to be a slightly different and function based on the specific plan. And you know, this question goes all the way back to the MOU, and it's really a question of, are we going to allow bigger houses and other tweaks to the R1 code in return for a park, off-site improvements, and other things of that nature? And to me, I think that's a reasonable question that I can understand people coming down on different points of view on. To me, I think we're getting to the point where I'm in favor of that. And hopefully we can iron out some of these details and get there. But I can understand how some people would say, you know, I'd rather just have R1. These houses are too big. I don't care about a park. But I think a park is good, and I think the off-site improvements are vital. So I think doing a specific plan which allows some houses that are bigger, or all of the houses are bigger, some more than others, than would be allowed under R1 is an equitable return for the city for the park and the offsite improvements. So I think that's, to me, that's sort of the setting. I think that's important to lay out.
Do you want to speak to that before
and
we?
I think, yeah, if we want to sort of talk at that general level, then we can start digging
Well,
down into the details.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking us back up to 25,000 feet and looking down on this. And when the monastery first decided that they needed funds for retired priests and they wanted to do something with this land, which is their land to do, it was zoned institutional. They could have proceeded in that regard, and we would not have as much say as we do now about what happened there. But it's still their land to develop. Instead, they came up with a plan that did not ask as much from the city as they could have. So they included a park, which is very helpful. While there is a park next door, the park next door, Wilderness Park, is not as conducive for children to play in as the park that they're proposing. And I've spoken with many people. I spend a lot of time in Wilderness Park because I do work up there. And there are neighbors who have children who wished that, they don't have to go all the way down to some other section of town in order to use a park for kids and a park that is designed for children to use. The additional improvements in the area are needed. I mean, Carter is not a great street to do anything with. It's a bottleneck now for anything that happens. And so the offsite improvements are helpful. The other thing that is influencing me right now is that if you drive around Sierra Madre, while we're a small city, we are still a small city of communities that are different in many regards. And we have a whole canyon that has its own zoning, that has its own set of rules and regulations for the houses there. We have number 1 Carter, which is a different set of houses. We go up to Arno, and we have big houses on giant lots because they were developed later on in Sierra Madre's history. If you go down to the boulevard and Sierra Madre and Baldwin, you're in that area. We're looking at smaller houses that were the original ones in the house in the town, and so you end up. What we're looking at is a community that, by design, is fairly isolated. To the north is the monastery, but there's a 1-acre landscape between the houses and the monastery. To the south, there's a 3-acre park that includes 18 feet of landscaping between the neighbors to the south. Plus, the neighbors to the south, it's to their rear of their yard, so that's the rear yard setback is a lot larger. To the east, you have we have Bailey Canyon Park. There are no neighbors on that side, and then to the west, you have deep lots that have been moved closer, moved forward to Sunnyside. So the rear setback is larger. Plus, it's the rear setback to the houses behind. So we're not talking about houses that are going to be right up tight to the original houses in Sierra Madre that are, small 1-bedroom houses or 2-bedroom houses. And plus now the time, the needs of the public and the time has changed. People seem to require a home office, so that there is a lot of pressure on people to build a slightly bigger house. And we have had discussions with the developer, and the size of these houses have changed and they've been modified. The question is, have they been modified enough so that it balances out what else the city is getting, and that's what part of our discussion will be. But this is not a development that is going to be at Sierra Madre and Baldwin. This is a development that's going to be up on the side of the hill. It's going to be isolated a lot in and of itself. And so the differences that we see there are not going to be differences that are going to influence the rest of the town per se, and they are going to be in that area. Will there be other developments that are similar? I don't know, because it's the last open space. But it will become a neighborhood in and of itself, the same way that One Carter, the same way that the Canyon, the same way that Arno are different neighborhoods. When we were firefighters and we got an address, we kind of knew what the house was going to be that, you know, we had in mind, because it's a different section of the town, and they are different kinds of houses. So that's, you know, where I'm at. So it's a neighborhood in and of itself. So I don't get a lot of heartburn on having the neighborhood be different. The question is how different.
Yeah, I agree that bringing this back up to the high level is important to remember. By right, there could be a lot of development up there with very little oversight. That's their right today. And we can't comment on anything but what's actually before us. And what we've been offered is a residential project here. Generally, I choose residential development over institutional development on anything that's that size.
Different impact.
Different impact. Absolutely different impact. So this is not a question of if something gets built there. It's just, what do we want there? And what we've been offered is residential. I think we're lucky for that, to be honest. And with that comes the request to make it able to be developed, as well as giving us a park. I had little kids for a long time where we didn't have any parks that close. So I think that the people who live over there are going to be very happy with having a park up there. It's a great way to have to learn about rattlesnakes, to go up into the Bailey Canyon Wilderness Park. Now my kids are old enough we can go do that. But I think that it's a question of whether or not the trade-offs are acceptable. I think when you look at other large developments in town, and Jameson Court predates, I think, when I lived here in town. So I don't know how that development went, but those are big houses. Yeah. Those are all this size house. Mm-hmm. And the same thing applies. They're very obfuscated from Grandview. You can kind of see them at the bottom of Highland there, but between them, nobody knows that there's all these houses that are stacked on top of each other that all are 3,200 minimum square feet. So I think that your point about this being a secluded neighborhood and that laying a better tableau for potentially a larger house, I think that you bring up a great point in the advent of people working from home. People need bigger houses because they're staying home. Office space is going away. People are not going back to offices. I think that we're going to see the same way that we are seeing less and less demand for parking and us shifting to taking public parking lots and helping to shift that to handle the need, because so many people are taking smaller vehicles and so many people are taking Ubers and biking and carts. I think that this is one of the other trade-offs that we're seeing in the market today. And so I think when we step back and take a look at all of it, we really need to weigh a lot of things, not just, hey, this house has a certain number and that number's a lot larger. We need to look at the whole landscape.
Cool.
So as we start looking at specifics, what jump out to you?
Well, do you want to go in order of the?
Sure, you want to do specific plan first, you said?
Yeah. My first comment is on section 3.2. If anyone has anything before that. Section 3.2, the definition of gross floor area was changed to match R1. I think that's a huge improvement, except there's an exception that we don't use our double height counting. And my preference would be to take that out and make it exactly like R1, but if we could at least understand in your plans how much sort of two-story volumes there are, maybe we could accommodate that but put a limit on it. I want to make sure that when we, we've talked about apples to apples, right? And we look at these numbers and we say R1, I don't want to have like 1,000 square foot great room that's huge, and these things look a lot bigger. So that's my first concern.
Yeah, I agree. The more we can standardize our understanding of the structures, the easier it will be for us to make decisions. And we already have something in place. We all know that the county does square footage different than Sierra Madre, and I would like to think that Sierra Madre more accurately reflects bulk and massing of the structure that the community has to look at. And so being consistent in that regard, I think, is good.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think we've been pretty clear that we'd like to use that R1. And so the other exception to that was the calculation of height.
Yep.
And I don't truly understand what the gain is. And if that's something that the applicant would like to speak to, I would love to hear that.
That's exactly my question, was because the definitions look very similar.
But they're
so
not
it's
the
like,
same.
Why don't we just go all the way and just use R1?
And that one doesn't affect square footage. So
Right.
I'm unclear as to why the height would be from the finished floor rather than what we have in R1.
Yeah, that jumped out at me like, well, why? Because we spent a lot of time on figuring out height.
We did. Is that something that we should ask the developer if they'd like to speak to?
I think the developer and the architect are.
Yes, we were just conferring about this. So generally the idea would be to allow high ceilings in some cases. Although I think we need to go back and evaluate, because it could be possible to comply. I think the flexibility and the thought was that double counting prevents ceiling heights from being higher, which is desirable today and actually allows the spaces to feel more open. But we'd be happy to go evaluate that and see if there's a percentage increase that would be necessary, if we could come up with some formula specifically tailored to the proposal.
Yeah, I think the idea of just exempting the double height out is a little frightening to me, because then we start imagining, stuff. So if we could say, limit that to a certain amount, or better yet, just comply. And then the same with the height is if there's a reason why we need to change the height definition, if we could get an explanation, or better yet, just revert to the R1 height definition.
Sure, yeah. With respect to height, it's something that we've talked about a lot. And the city's definition makes sense if you're in an existing neighborhood that's not being subdivided and is not part of a master plan like this. We have an existing R1 house and somebody comes in next door where the site is already graded. And so when you're measuring height from the lowest point, meaning natural grade, that makes sense in a situation in which you're not changing the topography. For us, it doesn't really make sense, and the reason why it would actually misrepresent the height of the buildings is because once the pads are finished, the houses will be a maximum of 25 feet. But because the city's definition measures from natural grade, in some cases we are raising 10 to 15 feet. And so in the specific plan, that number would say be 40 feet.
Right.
But that's really a misrepresentation of the actual height of the building, meaning when you're on Street A in the Meadows community, you look at the house, it will be a 25-foot house. No one is going to think, well, 5 years ago, the grade was 10 feet lower, so this house is actually 40 feet. So it really doesn't accurately represent what we're proposing, and that's why we proposed measuring it, in this case, from finish pad.
So would you be okay with saying height is defined in the R1 code, except it's based on finish grade as per the approved grading plan as part of the track map?
Yes.
Okay, I would prefer to see that, because I didn't compare every word and, game out every possibility. And if it's the finish height of the grade, I understand that, and that makes sense to me, because you're going to do a certain amount of grading.
Right.
And if we approve that grading plan, we should start as that as the base.
Correct. Yes, we'd be happy to make that clear.
And the two-story areas, I mean, when you walk around Arcadia and you walk around Sierra Madre, the thing that stands out to you most about the difference in the houses is you walk around Arcadia and the reason why they're referred to as McMansions is they have these giant two-story openings that, are over the top for a reason. And, that doesn't reflect the value of the community. And, you know, if you want to be over the top, fine, but not here.
And I would take a look at the code, because the way I'm reading the code, it says that it's the greater height of adjoining finished grade or pre-existing natural grade.
Whichever is lower.
No, whichever yields the greater height of the building.
Yeah, but that means that it's the greater height measured against the we've gone over.
Commissioner Dennison, we're happy to look at it
Are we adding
again.
this to our list to
We
revisit?
should, but
Okay.
it is original grade if you can figure out what that is. And if we go by finished grade, I'm fine with that, because I think that's
Okay.
The concept of the plan. My next comment was on section 3.7. And this is, there was a notation added that if there's multiple retaining walls, they should be terraced, but there's still no maximum for the height. And I think we need a maximum height for retaining walls. In the hillside management zone, the height is 4 feet. In R1, it's 6 feet. My preference is the 4, but it's got to be no higher than 6. And if you need a retaining wall that's more than that, if you need a 12-foot or an 8-foot, you got a terrace.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it should also say, except as set forth in the specific plan, walls and fences should otherwise comply with section 1748.130, which is the walls and fences section in Sierra Madre Code. And then, anything else on that? Are we,
No.
My other concerns, I don't know where these really come in because they're based on community input, but I'm still concerned of the concerns of the Crestville neighbors, and I'm heartened that the neighbors and the applicant were discussing things. But I think with regard to the park, I would prefer to have bathrooms in it, but I think that's really something that the Community Service Commission should decide. And so I think there's a certain amount of flexibility for them to make that determination, and other things. It makes sense to me. The issues of the engineering surveys for the existing retaining walls and the flood stuff, I think we should have some more attention on that. I don't really understand all of those issues, although I will say a 50-year flood doesn't happen that often, theoretically once every 50 years. But there's also potentially some issues that are just specific to the neighbors that really aren't within the city's purview, and so I very much encourage the neighbors, especially the immediate neighbors and the applicant, to discuss issues, and maybe they can find some specific workarounds that, you know, that the way those are addressed are between the neighbors and the applicant, and are not on the city, because you talked about the city planners looking, and the city planners are going to do their best job, but they don't know all your individual issues, and so that might be something that you guys need to iron out yourselves. My next comments are 3.87.
That was where I was too. Go ahead.
So we talk about in 387 averages and minimum numbers of 1-stories, and that works from the applicant's standpoint. But once the map is approved and the houses are built, we need to have a limit that applies to each house, so the homeowner knows what they can, how much additions they can do or whatnot. And we don't want the situation where a 1-story homeowner thinks, oh, I'm going to build a 2nd-story addition. So I think that in 3.87A3, the max floor area of each lot should be fixed through the tentative map process and noted on the map. And in 3.87A4, the 1-story limits should be fixed. And for each lot that allows only 1 story, that should be a requirement, set on that lot. And then in 3.87A.
Actually,
yeah.
I fell behind. I'm sorry. So, the site development regulations chart, table 3-2. which came just before 3.86, sorry. It says the lot coverage minimum is 50%. I don't think we should include any kind of a minimum lot coverage
Yeah, fair enough.
whatsoever. So I'd like to see that removed.
Okay, so, in 3.8.7A4B, this is dealing with the angle planes. We talked about this earlier. I think it's great that all the 1 stories will comply, but it was my understanding that a good portion of the 2 stories would as well. So I would like to get an understanding of how many that is, and at least have some restrictions on some of the 2 stories meeting the angle plane requirements. And then section 3.8.7A9 is, again, the walls and fences. It's the same issue as we discussed in section 3.7. And that's the end of mine for section 3.
That's the end of mine for section 3.
I agree that I would like to, I would like a little more confirmation on the angle plane. I think there will be intersections on the angle plane. I expect some of that on the 2-story houses. I just want to know how much or where.
Yeah, if we get, the point where the lots are wide enough that some of those comply, if we could put that percentage in, I think that would be helpful to give us protection.
I had not thought about future modifications to these houses. That's an excellent point, that somebody buys the house and they say, well, I'm going to bump out here or there. I guess on the 1-story houses, I don't have as much heartburn as if they put something on a 2-story house. But locking in the square footage, and it is what it is, and that's that. I'm okay with that. We've already provided them with enough leeway and permission that more in the future is not. Although
Well, it just means that they won't have any additional by right, and they would have to come for a variance.
They might have some, but they'll know how much, right? So like, if the average is 3,500, and then in the first blush the developer doesn't max that out, and so there's like 5,000 square feet to go around, you don't want to encourage people to try to add on to use that up and not be the last one who can't, right? So you want to just fix that at the map stage, say, this lot, this is the total buildable square footage. You can or you can't have a second story. You have to comply with angle plane, or you don't. And then when people are buying that, they know, and it's not buried in some specific plan somewhere that your average homeowner isn't going to understand. So I appreciate all the additions to section 5. They look good to me. I don't have any changes there.
That was much appreciated to put that effort in.
My next comment is in section 6.2.4. And this is the Community Service Commission's review of the park, and there's a 3-meeting limit. I think that we should clarify that 3-meeting limit applies to the Community Services Commission, so that if it needs to be appealed to the City Council for some reason, they still have 2 meetings.
And they're going to be the people that, I think they should be the people that decide about the bathrooms.
Yeah.
It needs to be a community need. It can't be dictated by one small group of people. I mean, it's a community park. If you take a small child up there and the child needs to go to the bathroom, I don't think it's a great thing that you have to, okay, now we're going to go back down Carter, around and over, and that's, So we've already given up the fact that there was going to be less. There's a lot of less parking at the park in response to the community's requests. But I think that the community, I think the people that use the park should expect a bathroom.
2 points about this, commissioners. The first point is this wouldn't be appealable because it's not an entitlement or any kind of permit that's being issued. The Community Service Commission would be reviewing and providing feedback, but there's nothing to appeal, so there would be no appeal process here. That's the first point. The second point I wanted to make is there was a concern among members of the public regarding notice, and generally we notice things for planning commission purposes because the state law tells us we have to notice it for certain kinds of entitlements. we can bake into the development agreement a noticing requirement within a certain foot radius to be provided to residents if that's the desire of the planning commission, to make sure that the affected residents are also aware and hopefully can attend the Community Services Commission meetings.
We seem to have a great deal of interest by the local residents in this process, so it probably would be, it would serve the community that they get notified.
Yeah, can we, I agree with that, but I want to circle back to the comments you said about what the commission's doing. The commission is just recommending, so who decides?
It's the developer that would decide. There's no entitlement being issued here.
Is there, okay, I don't think that works. And so if we need to address that here, or in this, in the development agreement or somewhere, you know, we can't have the Community Service Commission have workshops and all sorts of great stuff and make recommendations, and then developers say, oh yeah, that's nice, forget it, here's the park you're getting, right?
And I think a potential fix can be that we include in development agreement mandatory language that whatever the recommendation is shall be followed.
Yeah, and if the developer or the neighbors for that matter want a right to appeal to the city council, I would be fine with that. I mean, if the developer feels like the, you know, Community Service Commission is
way out of line,
gold plated, whatever, right? Or if the neighbors feel like they're not hearing them. I mean, the city council, they get paid the big bucks, they're elected. They should have the right to make the final call on that if there's an issue.
Noted.
Sorry, we've already closed the public comment.
I know, but I don't know that, that's why I was trying to explain why you should change the language to may include rather than shall include.
I'm sorry, we can't take public comment right now. Thank you.
Chair Dennison, regarding the noticing requirement, what is the commission's pleasure? Are we looking at a
Upper left quadrant. That is north of Sierra Madre Boulevard, and that is west of Baldwin.
So generally we have a 300-foot radius for planning projects. Is that, do we want to continue to have a 300-foot radius noticing requirement, or is
at
there
least
some
because
other
it's going to be that community that uses that park and beyond. I mean, we have people that come here all the way, who live all the way down on Sierra Madre Boulevard.
and would it be noticing, is it the radius of the park, or is it going to be the radius of the entire Madre Rosa site? 300 feet of that site, or just where the proposed park is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, you might as well do the whole.
I would go with the biggest net.
Because, you know, north is the mountains, and east is Bailey Canyon, so it's not gonna add a whole bunch of people. But I do think I think the city's been doing a good job of posting stuff online now, and I think we really need to, even if we have a statutory or you know, those yellow card things that go to 300 feet, I don't think they do anywhere near as good a job as you know, putting stuff online. And we should also have a sign on the, is that gonna work? No, it's not gonna work. Okay.
And as far as the appellate process, I'm assuming that's going to follow our existing code's appellate process. Okay.
Yeah.
My next one was 6-4.
Yeah, mine's 6-4 too. Well, it just, I note that we've got an inconsistency between the specific plan and the development agreement on who's doing the minor modifications. and I think you said staff would prefer to have the city manager do it.
Staff doesn't have a preference. We just wanted to make it consistent, and because the development agreement says city manager, so we went with city manager for specific plan.
I'm fine with city manager, but can we get the planning director to do a written recommendation to the city manager? I just,
They're the ones who are going to be in touch with the project the
Yeah.
most, right? So, Mr. City Attorney, now that we've added this language to the development agreement that has these 3 grand ideas as to what can't be changed, walk me through how that interplays with Section 6.4.
Certainly. So Section 6.4, we have to distinguish between both documents, because there are minor modifications that might happen to the specific plan, and there are minor modifications that might happen to the development agreement. Now, with respect to the specific plan, the minor modifications are the ones stated here, and the ones that can't be modified are those listed. With respect to the development agreement, what can't be amended are, again, value, the timing, and the performance. So there are really 2 separate types of minor modifications happening. For both of them, the city manager would have final say on what constitutes a minor modification. And if you would like, we can, in order to avoid any potential claims of inconsistency, so we don't have an argument about which document trumps which, the specific plan language here in 6.4 can be incorporated into the development agreement, such that it's clear that one regime exists for the specific plan and one exists for the development agreement.
Okay, I'm fine with that. The thing that I was really getting to is making sure that Section 6.4 that has to do with a specific plan wouldn't be overridden by the other part.
And that wasn't the intention when we drafted it.
Okay, so then maybe that is an elegant solution to adopt this. With one change, since we're on the subject, of adding height to H. A 20% difference in height would take a 25-foot building and make it a 30-foot building. And so making that a minor modification seems out of context with the other ones that were chosen. So
I'd invite the developer to see if they'd be open to that amendment to the specific plan.
Mr. Developer, would you be open to an amendment of that nature to the specific plan?
Generally, yes, we'd be happy to evaluate it. We're not proposing any homes that are larger than 25 feet. So, there may be an instance in which when you get into final design, there's some site condition that you find where you may need an extra foot or 2 feet, certainly not 20%. So there may be an instance in which we would seek, the ability to do a smaller percentage, perhaps not 20, if that would be acceptable.
Make your offer and we'll review it. My offer is to include it in the list of things that aren't changeable.
And just to clarify, we talked about earlier, but I want to make sure we capture that now as we're actually deliberating, is an appeal procedure in the minor modification as well to the city council.
Understood. We can. So in that case, the city manager's decision would be able, and who would have the right to appeal?
Well, I think anybody would have the right to appeal if they pay, and the city council would have the right to call it up.
Understood.
And we talked, or no, actually, it's already in there, the revision that the planning commission and the city council get notice.
Yeah, we get notice.
That's what I wanted.
And
the
hopefully
notice.
that would head off any appeals, right? Because I would think the city manager would hear any comments from commissioners and council members.
Well, I guess playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, if we put everything up that's a minor mod for appeal, people could simply appeal every single thing.
But it costs $500. The city's appeal.
Commissioner, as I think through this now, the challenge with the minor modification appeal process, in contrast to the appeal process for the park, would be providing notice to residents. How would residents be aware that a minor modification is taking place.
Public report by
But
the,
it would be done in arrears, right? We only have annual reports, so that might be an exhibit in the annual report of here's how many minor modifications happened.
no, a report to the city council. As
Yeah.
part of the city manager's, presentation to the city council, the following minor mods were made at
Like an item on consent. That's
item on consent.
You could also, I mean, you said we're gonna give it to the city council and the planning commission. We could also say it has to be posted on the city's website. It could be a place.
I don't know that I think that business has to get done at some point, and the minor modification is the letting business get done. And so I guess the way that I'm kind of approaching it is, what are the things that absolutely need to be considered by the larger audience in the community and the public? I think that if there's a 1 foot setback change as a minor modification, that we're entrusting staff to handle that. So I guess the way that I was approaching it is more, what are the things that I think are so important and reviewable and commentable by the public that they would rise to that level? Because at a certain point, a 1 foot modification, a 6-inch modification is a minor modification, has to wait a month till the city council has reviewed it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think to a certain extent, like I said, it also, if we notice the planning commission and the city council, they're gonna make their voices heard to the city manager, and the city manager's probably gonna wanna listen to, those folks, so.
And specifically, the city manager was designated as opposed to, for example, the planning director, because the city manager is a direct report to the city council. Unlike any other line staff, the city attorney and the city manager are direct reports, so they are the most responsive and to any city council concerns.
Okay, I'm persuaded. So scotch the appeal on the minor mod, but leave it for the park. And the other thing about the park
Let's
is,
just make sure that the things that we have concerns about, we get carved out. I think that's the quid
Yeah,
pro
yeah,
quo on that.
yeah, I agree. And,
I-
also the thing about the park is it's a one-time approval, right? It's not ongoing. That's it for me on the specific plan.
That's it for me on the specific plan as well.
I'm good.
So I have a question that will help ask me other questions on the development agreement. So I may have done a poor job of asking this previously, and so help me understand. I thought I was under the impression that once a house has been built, that it's then governed by R1 standards, not by the specific plan. No.
No. The specific plan is essentially the new zone. So that is the zone that, that's the zoning designation that applies there, and all the development and design standards that exist in the specific plan will govern every home within that.
And in their, and any future modifications of those homes.
In
It
any
runs with
future
the land,
modifications.
yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. So then we absolutely have to have that square footage limit, or else that's going to cause a bunch of problems. Okay. I'm ready for the, if there are no other non sequitur questions, then I guess we can.
I've got 3 comments. My first one is section 4. 4I Romanet 3. And this goes to the issue of the widening of Carter. I touched on this before. I don't think the concept of a fee payment is fixes the problem. This is not an issue of equity or something. It's an issue of the road has to be widened. And so I think that it needs to be, and I'm not exactly sure whether this goes in the development agreement or specific plan or both places, but the road needs to be purchased, the width needs to be purchased from the county, and the road needs to be done before the final map is recorded.
Would the commission be satisfied with a condition in the tentative tract map that requires not the procedures laid out here in the development agreement, but specifically that the tentative tract map will not be issued unless the county, unless the developer is able to acquire the rights for the expansion.
So, I guess one of my concerns with that would be help me understand the interplay of timing, because it sounds like that would be one of the triggers for permitted delays.
I don't think that would be. Allow me to do a little bit of research and to get back to you on that, Chair Dennison. I think the real timing issue would be the fact that the general plan and zoning have already changed, but then you have a tentative tract map that's preventing this project from going forward.
For the development, it holds.
For that specific development,
Right.
right? And so as a result, the development would essentially be held hostage to the county until the developer can either find a new route that's acceptable, but that would require another specific plan amendment, or they can somehow convince the county otherwise.
But I mean, the first option is exactly the point, right? If this doesn't work as the second egress, then we need to redo the specific plan and figure out a way to fix it, right? And hopefully this all just gets done and the county plays ball. But I think acquisition of the county right away by tentative stage and completion of the off-site improvements by final map is what we need. And I'm talking about the east-west section, not the north. The north-south, I hope you can do that too, but
That's a like to have as opposed to a must have.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the civil engineer may want to, because there are probably a lot of utilities that are underneath the existing corridor that are going to have to get used, that may require that road to be torn up anyway and replaced in some form or fashion. So I think that roadway is going to have to be addressed. You have, I think there's more than one way to accomplish that, but I think the county is the big, has the biggest say. But the other thing that I think was interesting is the pathway that they drew, either through or whatever, will also be a benefit to the city because it'll provide for the first time ADA access into the Wilderness Park, because currently the Wilderness Park has no ADA access. So people in wheelchairs can't use that park. And that pathway will be very helpful. So, there's a lot of things for the city to gain there. But as far as just moving a chain link fence, it doesn't seem like an insurmountable problem.
And I think one other issue that was raised was access, the northerly access to the trail.
Yes.
That's another nice to have. I don't think that's, something that puts the project on hold. If the county is like, for some reason, recalcitrant on that.
I think that came about because the question came up, well, how do the people who are in the development access the wilderness area, and as opposed to going out and down and around, and we'll just put a gate there. Well, that's fine.
No, I think it makes the project a lot better, so I hope that can be done, but I don't think it's a fundamental need. Unlike the widening of Carter, which is, I think, just a condition that has to get completed before the project can move forward.
So, obviously, we'll need to investigate whether or not what it does to the timeline of the project, because there's, I think, by design, tight timelines for that first 24 months. And I don't know if this is something that the county can do in 2 weeks, like they do everything else, or slightly longer. And so I want the project to be tenable. So we got to figure out what that right balance is.
Question for you on the Permit Process Streamlining Act. Does that apply to the map, the tentative map?
Yes.
So what happens if the applicant submits the map but doesn't have county approval? And the time limit for, under the streamlining permit app runs and they still don't have approval? What do we just deny it?
They haven't acquired the rights, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it depends on how the commission wants to condition this. If the commission wants to condition it as by the tentative, that in the tentative track map approval, there will be a condition that they acquire, if they haven't done so already, that they acquire and construct the offsite improvements by the date of the final map recording. I think that might resolve the concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think acquire by tentative and complete by final makes sense, because if they haven't acquired by tentative, I don't have any faith that it's gonna happen. Like, we're 2 years from now, I understand we need to get this approval and everything before we can interface with the county, but then 2 years from now, the county still hasn't done anything. That really makes me worried that it's just never gonna happen, right? As far as the other thing is, if we acquire from the county, you know, then the part about how the city could do it and charge back, that all makes sense to me, because that could actually happen. So I guess I'm much more concerned about acquiring from the county than I am even completing the road.
Perhaps then, like a bit of a hybrid approach then, to have a requirement that the applicant acquire within the first 2 years upon submission of the tentative track map. If the applicant fails to acquire, then the city will attempt to acquire as a condition for the tentative track map approval, and that the improvements would need to be constructed before the final map is recorded.
I'm okay with that.
But why do we think the city's gonna have any better luck than the applicant?
I don't know that the city would have better luck than the applicant. I'm not sure. The only difference being is that the city chose, it could harness it could exercise its existing connections at the county to see to it that something gets done that perhaps the applicant isn't able to do. That's the only, I think, difference that I could think of.
My concern is the tentative map gets approved, and then it shifts to the city to get the acquisition, and then the city has the same luck as the applicant, and then, I can hear the story, well, you tried, you failed, no one could do this, let's just, build the thing. I don't like that. I just want to say they have to acquire it by the time the tentative map is approved.
But whatever is the direction of the commission.
Did you look like you wanted to speak?
Yes, so we were just discussing the timing element, and we'll of course discuss further. We're kind of doing, on the fly, and we can. So in the engineering design process, there's various scales of drawings that we're going to go through. The tentative map drawing, that scale drawing, we cannot acquire this from the county prior to the tentative map being done. We have to go to final engineering, which requires public improvement plans to be submitted to the county for approval. So in any engineering, there's 2 phases, and they're actually different scale drawings. All of our tract boundary will be on our tentative map, everything within our tract. Offsite improvements, extremely commonly, it happens in every single project. Offsite improvements are always a condition of the tentative map, and they're conditioned to be completed by a certain date subject to negotiation. Typically, it's prior to the issuance of building permits, not final map. There's a variety of reasons for that. From a business standpoint, there's a critical number of steps in financing it will be very challenging if there are outstanding conditions to work with public agencies like that creates a lot of uncertainty that the process can't proceed. So really the bottom line is you can't start building houses prior to this being satisfied. However, you can advance your engineering. So we can process drawings of the city. We can get ready to go build houses. So you're not going to prevent us from advancing the project. That's really what we need, Commissioner Dennison, to your point, to be tenable. We have to be able to advance the engineering process of the city. So we can't put everything on hold. In the county, that public improvement plan, that drawing, can't happen until we have a tentative design and we go into the final engineering level design phase. So we'd be more than happy with a condition. Completely understand the absolute need for these improvements to get made. We are going to take all possible efforts to do that. We regularly do that in projects, both requiring right-of-way as well as building offsite improvements of all types. This is very, very common. This is not atypical. Every single project we have ever done has required offsite improvements. So it's a very common part of the process. We know it's an essential part of the process, but we need to be able to advance our engineering and our design such that we can get towards building a house. And so that's kind of how the timing works. We define with a condition on the tentative map, but we can't hold up the tentative map from being issued until the offsite improvement is approved, because we need that final engineering to commence before we can work with the county in finalizing that.
But houses can't be built until the offsite is done.
Correct.
But doesn't the map vest? When does the map vest?
Upon final.
I think a tentative map is good for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But you could have a vesting tentative track map, right? I mean, the problem is, if we get to the point where we say it's just not going to happen, right? Then we need to figure out what Plan B is. And if you've already got a vested map, it's too late for Plan B, and that's my big concern. So I don't want to mess up your financing, right? I just want to make sure that it actually gets done, and we can't get so far down the road and then it doesn't happen that we go, oh, well, let's just build it anyhow.
Totally understood, and I think that we can work with staff to come up with something that's agreeable to all parties. I also think that, and this has happened on another project that we've worked on, the city always has the option of condemnation in order to acquire the right-of-way should the city pursue that. So the idea that there's just, you know, an option where there's you know, that and we obviously there are many conditions associated with that, but that we have seen that as well. If for whatever reason we don't anticipate this at all, given it's 9 or 10 feet of right-of-way, which is not a humongous amount, that the city condemns properties. Jurisdictions do that all the time in order to create new public roads. And so in the event that that was absolutely necessary, certainly that's something that can be explored as well.
I thought we couldn't.
We can't condemn county, can we?
We can't take away county property? Really?
I've never seen I've never seen that process occur. I've never participated in anything like that. I don't know that it's not possible.
Okay.
Okay.
So it sounds like, just so you're really clear, we don't want to get to a point where
we can't go back.
Yep.
And we want to get them as far along. In fact, I was going to ask questions. Sorry, go ahead. Finish that thought.
I was just going to say, I think that one of the issues with the offsites, which is really common that they're sort of far down the line, is the jurisdiction that's granting approval is the one that controls the offsites. And the problem is that we have a different jurisdiction that's involved. And so that's where my heartache comes. If this were a purely city park, then I would say, well, look, if the city's being difficult, the city's the one who's causing the problem, right? But we've got to deal with the county.
The only other process I'm aware of is an annexation proceeding through the Local Agency Formation Commission. And that is a time-consuming process. That'll take.
But it's in the city already. I mean, it's not county. It's not county jurisdiction, so I don't know that does us any good, does it?
I don't know. Is it within the city's sphere of influence?
No, it's in the city boundary. It's just owned by the county.
It's just owned by the county. Something to explore.
Sounds like you guys will take that away and work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Part and parcel of that is the grading map and the street improvements and the flood control. Is that something that can be done before the building permits are issued?
No. We would need to have the building permits issued for the infrastructure.
Because if we could keep moving on that and get that in.
Well, but the problem is if you build all the internal roads and then you don't have this access and your plan B is some other access, all the roads work towards this access. And if I don't even know what plan B would be.
Yeah.
But
There are not a lot of options to go over Bailey Canyon Park or under it or whatever, because, yeah.
Chair Dennison, if I could, one other, our traffic engineer reminded me, we do have 20 feet of right-of-way in this location. So if for whatever reason the county, again, I want to, our civil engineer reminded me, we acquire right-of-way for offsite improvements from public agencies all the time. It's very common. We just did it with Caltrans, for example, and other agencies. So the interagency coordination is a very common condition in development projects where you have interagency, water agencies, park districts, other public agencies. So it is very typical. However, in the event that that couldn't happen, we could still widen Carter Avenue to 20 feet to provide two 10-foot travel lanes in each direction. You would not get a sidewalk, but we could widen it to have a full width point of access for ingress and egress. We have the right of way to do that right now. And the road is eroded and is not 20 feet wide. And so we could provide that improvement. The city and we control that, and we would be happy to agree in all cases at a minimum to widen Carter to a full width improvement to facilitate safe vehicular access.
And the sidewalk would be one of your options that goes into the park as opposed to on the border?
Correct. We could evaluate all potential alternate sidewalk options. However, that sidewalk would be on county land, so we would need their approval. So we're saying in the event, in an absolute worst case, that the county, for whatever reason, absolutely refused after 4 years of city and us working together on this, we still would have the ability to create a safe improvement for motorists and a secondary point of egress for safety purposes. That is possible today.
Isn't it a city park though?
The park, as I understand it, and that's, and this is mostly on hearsay, is that when they built the flood control dam, they backfilled and left that land vacant, and the city asked for, oh, can we use it as a park? Yeah, sure, just don't put a hole in the dam. And so that's how it became. It's part of actually flood control. And so, they took over that valley that was there and put the flood control dam, and then it has the drainage that goes underneath Lima all the way down into Arcadia.
Right.
You can walk the whole thing, so that's how that got there.
Well, we can put trails in the park without talking to the county, right?
We modify the park on a regular, well, not on a regular, but we work in the park on a regular basis, and county doesn't say or know anything.
We couldn't put a 6 feet wide concrete trail that just happens to parallel the road?
I imagine it could exist for a long time before anyone took notice.
Okay.
So, but I'm not, I won't.
I can't provide any opinions on it.
Yeah,
Well, I think staff
This is not on their radar, because I think the it's a flood control area, so it's more on flood control, and those guys just care that the dam works. They don't care about the park, and so, and the county does, park people, it's not their park, so they don't care. So it's kind of like, an empty piece of land that the city has used as a park.
Commission, if you have some direction on what the applicant just proposed, what the developer just proposed regarding that worst case scenario, having a two-way access but removing the sidewalk, is that something you would like included in the development agreement?
I think having less than optimal options is often a bad idea. If we can't get the county to play ball, then we can come back and reevaluate that, but I don't want to put that in. That seems like an invitation to skimp. I would rather have it as designed. We have two options in there, one that parallels and one that goes up. I'm good with either one of those, but that would be my preference. That we try everything we can to get that first.
Is that the commission's consensus?
I agree. But we will make note of that last resort.
My next comment was in section 8.
Right.
And this is dealing with the minor modifications. So we've already talked about it quite a bit in the with this specific plan. But we just want to make sure that those, because the development agreement supersedes the specific plan in the instance of an inconsistency, I don't want that to be a loophole to allow all the things that we said we don't want to allow in the specific plan. And then my next comment is, maybe it's section 12.c, but maybe it's more general. And this is the issue of enforcement. And, you know, we talked earlier tonight about changing the zoning back. I don't have any desire to change the zoning back, but I think going back to the overarching concept here is we're allowing a development with greater than R1 development standards. And in return, we're getting development of a park, which is going to capture water retention, and we're getting off-site improvements, right? So, to me, it doesn't seem equitable if those things don't happen, that there would still be an ability to have those greater than R1 development standards. So, similar to how we had in the One Carter settlement agreement, it would be my preference that we have the development standards, at least the floor area development standards, in the development agreement, and say in the specific plan, we just follow R1. And then, you know, we've got the override of the development agreement of the specific plan, so that if there's a default under the development agreement, we don't get those off-site improvements, we don't get the park, one of the things we can do is just revert back to R1 development standards.
And Commissioner, can you help me understand why wouldn't the specific performance remedy be sufficient?
Well,
if there's an issue with them not providing net zero payments or not supplying the park or anything.
Well, one of the things that is the counterparty to the development agreement is a single-purpose LLC that just owns this development. And, you know, some people might call that a shell company, but that's the way these transactions are done. That's perfectly normal, but it also means it has no financial backing other than this development, right? And so the concern is if that entity can't pull through, if the market turns down a little bit or whatever, say the city actually goes through that, which we know how city does code enforcement, right? So that's a big assumption to begin with. But even if that happens, the city sues for specific performance, wins a judgment for specific performance, the court enjoins this single-purpose limited liability company to do it, and it just goes bankrupt.
But wouldn't it also be the case then that if that lawsuit were to happen, that the developer couldn't then develop the sites with the homes using the specific plan standards? So they would be prevented. So the real benefit to the developer is the development and selling the development off, and they wouldn't be able to develop that site if they didn't perform for the terms of this agreement.
Well, I mean, the development standards are all under the specific plan, right?
The development standards are under the specific plan, correct?
So
then we would have already said that those are the standards that are there. So somebody else.
But the development agreement contemplates them, you know, design review permit, there's all these other things that need to be issued, all these other permits and entitlements that need to be issued, that wouldn't be issued without them performing under the
But okay, so here's the question. So we come to the track map approval. We're under Streamlining Permit Act. We have to follow objective rule. Is developer default under the development agreement reason to turn that down? Because when we had One Carter, there was open space land that was supposed to be maintained, and the developer just didn't pay the property taxes on it. It was foreclosed and sold at a tax sale, and then they came through and said, oh, we've got all these houses to build. And we said, yeah, but you don't have that. And our city attorney at the time told us, oh, you can't say no to these houses even though they didn't perform.
No, that's right. The design review permit findings don't include a finding that says development agreement has been followed or hasn't been followed. But if we're assuming for a moment that the developer is going to be enjoined by the court, I imagine the injunction or the remedy we would seek would include some kind of requirement that they be prohibited from building, and I have to think this through a little bit more to figure out how you prevent them from building, but I imagine the remedy would include like some kind of stop on any kind of development or processing of permits until they perform under the agreement, because if one party is performing their side of the obligation but the other party isn't, I don't see how the court would force us to perform our obligations.
But that would require us at that point to have sued the developer, right? I mean,
correct.
I just think that's a huge process, right? Even, imagine that there's a default under the development agreement. It's going to take the city a long time to sue, even if it does. And if it does, it's going to take the court a long time to act. And a lot of stuff could happen in that interim. So, like I said, one way we can deal with this is moving the development standards to the development agreement. Another one is to say one of the conditions of approval of the trap map, and the others is a finding that the developer is in compliance with the development agreement.
As the person drafting it, I think I'd feel more comfortable with your latter approach, only because I think it makes more sense conceptually to separate out development design standards in one document and approval standards and findings in the development agreement.
Let me ask this question, from an order of operations type thing. So we recommend the city council approve the specific plan. City council approves the specific plan. And I'm not insinuating anything, I'm just saying, if the developer goes away, haven't we already approved the new zoning in the specific plan?
Correct, but any successor in interest to that developer for the development of that site will be bound by the same obligations that the current developer is bound by, because the development agreement runs with the land.
Goes with the land,
It's
and
not
not the,
specific to this developer, unlike most contracts which are specific to the parties that enter into it. They can't bind third parties. In this case, we are binding third parties because the agreement runs with the land. So whoever steps in the developer's shoes.
it's like a covenant.
Exactly, would be bound by this development agreement.
So they wouldn't be able to break it up and sell off individual lots to people. Somebody would have to come in and buy the whole thing in order to perform all of the tasks there.
So this is a difficult question, because now assume for a second, Vice Chair Hutton and I had this conversation earlier. Assume for a second that they do go bankrupt, and then it goes before a bankruptcy court, and you have now a number of different parties that are successors in interest, not one. Then what happens? What happens is they're all subject to the development agreement. Now, how does the development agreement going to impact all of them? I don't know. Well, I think that's something we'll have to figure out at that time.
But keep in mind also, that would also have to happen after the final map is recorded, because the individual lots aren't created until the final map is recorded.
Correct.
So you'd have performance all the way through final map, right?
Correct.
What happens, another scenario, the park has to be dedicated 60 days after so many houses.
22nd house.
What if they don't do that?
Specific performance, again, is our remedy. But they have assets now. If they've built
22 houses.
22 homes.
They've sold them.
Well, I would think that there's some revenue generated from that, and
yeah, I
So
think at that point, you're probably got the ability to.
It's a three-party agreement, right?
it's a three-party agreement, correct?
So it's not just them on the hook for this. So the specific performance would not just be the developer, it would also be Madre de la Rosa.
The congregation would be required required to perform specifically for their obligations, not for the developer's obligations. So there are two separate sets of obligations.
So they're not
They're not
going to widen the road.
They're not going to widen the road. But they would be, let's assume for a moment that the congregation didn't split up the Madre de la Rosa parcel into an open space, then the city could sue for specific permits to force them to do so.
But couldn't we just, I mean, the map is going to have The tentative track map is gonna have all that in it.
It should, yes.
Okay. It seems like there's a little bit of homework to do on this point.
Commissioner Spears, you have anything else?
I'm good.
That's all I got.
I think that's all I have as well. So I believe that we are tentatively slated for the next meeting as well.
That is correct, on the 18th of August, which is in 2 weeks. So the question goes back to the representative of New Urban West, if they're able to comply with all
Are we
these.
doing Alverno on the 18th as well?
No.
No.
No, okay.
We're on the
Say,
first.
yeah, that's-
We're on the first meeting in August. We already pushed that one out.
Good.
Commissioners, based on what I've heard, I do believe that we could provide a revised red line to you within 2 weeks.
And we can, I believe I can get the development conditions corrected in 2 weeks as well.
Great.
So the packet goes out next Thursday. 1 week.
Sleep is entirely overrated, Mr. City Attorney. Then I guess I will entertain a motion to continue this to a date certain of August 18th.
Also move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Oh, I guess there can't be any opposed. Sorry. Carries unanimously.
Not unless you're voting twice.
This is not Louisiana. Planning Commission reports.
I got nothing.
I have nothing.
I have nothing. Planning and Community Preservation Department reports.
Well, we have a public hearing continued for the Meadows of Bailey Canyon. We also have a design review permit application that we will be reviewing on the 18th, just before we take the Meadows up for reevaluation.
Design review. We haven't seen one of those in a while.
Yeah.
I'd also wanted to introduce to you Joseph Nosrat. He's going to be our administrative aide, who's taking over Jen Peterson's responsibilities in the department. You've heard that Jen has moved on to the Public Works Department. She's been there for at least a month, or maybe a little bit longer, a couple months, 3 months already.
Just a little.
Yeah. So Joseph is being trained currently by Jen on a few tasks, including meeting minutes.
Fabulous. Welcome.
Welcome.
Piece of cake.
And I have no further items.
Every comment.
All right. Then I will conclude our meeting until our next regular meeting of August the 18th.
Cool.